Waters of the Southeastern Asian, hundreds of rocky islands, banks of reef and coral, one of the most complex and active places of the world. China, Brunei, Malaysia, Philippines, and Vietnam are fighting for these waters in order to have benefits of seabed full of hydrocarbon reserves, natural gas, and raw material. The matter is strategic because it is a route that is highly transited and that connects the Pacific with the Indian Sea and has an annual commercial route of billions of dollars. A specialist in this area saw in the meridional China a place of commercial exchange and cultural exchange with China and Indochina. United States is also in this territory, has allies, sails around with its ships, and also warplanes claiming navigation freedom. Southern China Sea is the dispute and our critical move today. Welcome. We're going to display news and actors involved. Twice this month, the United States sent strategic bombarders around the southern Chinese Sea that is claimed almost in full. On 4, this bombarder performed an alleged training act, and 2 bombarders with nuclear capacity left Anderson Base in Guam, west of the Pacific Ocean, and made military exercise before they came back. The United States recognizes that its aircraft operates to support its allies, that's what they say, to show their muscle to their adversaries like China and North Korea, and to keep this region free and open. What does this mean for the United States? We will see it today. In any case, China says this is a clear provocation. Since the southern Chinese Sea is part of the Pacific, any armed attack against our forces or the Philippines will generate common defense obligations according to Article 4 of our Mutual Defense Agreement, which is clear. Our obligations are real, and the southern Chinese Sea is certainly part of an important part of water for navigation. I think everybody understands that Trump's administration truly committed to guarantee that these seas remain open. We are emphasizing on the importance of keeping and promoting peace, security, stability, and freedom of navigation and overflowing the southern Chinese Sea. Now let's go to the characteristics of the South China Sea, which is expanded through the continental platform and has rich fishing banks, oil, and gas, as we said in the beginning. South China Sea, or Sea of Southern China. It's a portion of the Pacific Ocean that meets the Indian Ocean in the east. It is located southeast of Asia, and it limits in the south Singapore, Sumatra, and the Karima. In the north, the Taiwan Strait. To the east, Philippine Islands, Borneo Islands, and the southeast, it meets the Gulf of Thailand, and to the west, it is separated by the Tonkin Gulf by the Ida Island, which is divided in 2 parts. The island of Taiwan is divided in 2 parts. It's China Sea and South China Sea. It has 3,500,000 square kilometers, 1 million more than the Mediterranean Sea and twice the Gulf of Mexico. In this area, there are more than 200 small islands, rocks, and reefs. The mouths of several rivers empty into it. This water body has huge geostrategic and economic value, especially for the economies that surround it. First, for the immense hydrocarbon reserves and abundance of fishing resource, and in second term, because it is just in the maritime route that connects Europe, Africa, and the Indian subcontinent with East Asia. It is a compelled passage of merchandise that go to Middle East and Africa. This has caused territorial differences for these resources, conflicts that seem not to have early solutions. The Spratly Islands are disputed by China, Taiwan, Malaysia, and Philippines. Brunei also, but has still not made any formal claim. After the first move, we barely had two of the actors involved. We will add news and review what was published last March 13 by Russian agency Sputnik. Beijing calls the United States behavior in the South China as irresponsible. He said that some countries that are away from the area unstabilize the zone, and this is irresponsible. Regarding another statement made by the United States by Mike Pompeo, Secretary of State, in an energy conference held in the state of Texas, says that China blocks the countries to the Pacific Basin for a value of $2.5 million. He said that, yes, there are disputes for the aquatic space, but China wants these disputes to be solved by the parties through dialogue and friendly and peaceful consultations. I would now go to El Orden Mundial, Hard Waters in the South China Sea, written by the Arsenio Cuenca, sociologist by the University of Sevilla, expert in armed conflicts. And the abstract we've chosen is that the U.S. Energy Agency calculates that this sea has around 11 billion barrels of crude and 190 billion cubic feet of natural gas. Fishing represents 12% of world total, and there are different figures in this regard. I would like to add another quote through the Strait of Malacca, passing through Singapore, where almost one-third of oil and half of the natural gas consumed in the world. If we add all imports and exports made through these waters, which are essential for the economies of the surrounding countries, the figure is 3.4 trillion US dollars, 20% of the capital flow related to international trade. This is important because it gives us a key regardless of the difference in figures according to the source. The thing is that resources are huge, mineral resources and broad hydrocarbon and natural gas. And this gives it a strategic location besides the maritime flow. Jorge Gestoso from Washington will give us more data on what is at stake in this strategic zone. Thank you very much. What is at stake is the great question. What is behind all this? A dispute between China and the United States in the South China Sea for a chain of rocky islands are uninhabited that in principle seem not to have great value. But it is estimated that this is a an economic pulse because they assume there's huge wealth like oil and hydrocarbon. But the United States in 2015, through one of its ships, a destroyer, violated the 15-mile rule and entered in this territory, which generated a strong reaction from China that said that it was a very serious provocation. In any in any case, the topic continues in dispute, and the surrounding countries, for example, Philippines, Brunei, and Malaysia, for them, this region of the world is a route to export their wealth, for example, fishing wealth, and could be affected by it. In any case, there's something very important. China is risking its relations with neighbors like Japan because of this tension. What will happen? If the United States has its eyes on the region because of its oil wealth, etc., it would be another chapter of its attempt to control the energy reserves around the world, as it has done in Libya and Iraq, Iran, and of course in Venezuela. We go back with you. Thank you, Jorge. Since we understand there are intra and extra-regional actors involved in this case, we should first ask the status and the reasons of the bilateral conflicts taking place in this region. We will first develop this after this pause. South China Sea, a dispute with the United States. We will go to Argentinian webpage, Voces en el Fénix, under the China. South China conflict in a geopolitical key written by Florencia Rubiolo. ASEAN, as the main Southeast Asia organization, is in a certain point. Several of the members this organization are fighting for this region, but all have China as their main trade partner. Vietnam and Philippines issued a joint note talking about this, but the denial of Cambodia, China's closest partner, refused to confront its neighbor and favored a declaration that does not mention the international verdict. It's talking about one of the chapters of the international arbitration, but the author also talks about the strategic relevance of this territory, the intensification of the Chinese advance in the region, and Philippines' report and the award. Deep waters in East Asia, more than 200 small islands divided in 5 blocks. Islands that are not inhabited but have high strategic value for several countries because of the regular merchandise traffic and a sea bottom that feeds many. This relevance explains that several dispute this zone. According to unofficial estimates, this sea could have between 60 or 70% of the hydrocarbons of the zone. They estimate 7 billion barrels, 900 cubic centimeters of natural gas, and all these zones feed the Southeastern Asia, and 1/3 of the world sea traffic, more than $18 million per year. The rules say that each country will have 370 kilometers of water surrounding and the bottom. China has the largest amount of territory and claims 80%, or almost 3 million square kilometers. It states that it claimed in 1973 before France and later on from Japan its sovereignty and that it has documents that prove that it has governed the island since the 17th century. Philippines claims its geographic proximity, and this has been sent by an arbitration court of United Nations on the right of the sea. And they have, through agreements with the United States, they have regular troops in the area. Malaysia and the Brunei Sultanate also claim a part that defend as exclusive economic zones. Even if Taiwan belongs to China, it also claims the same. It has had all the parties in conflicts met in Cambodia in 2012 and signed the so-called agreements of conduct of the parties. We would like to add analysis and deepening together with Juan Romero, historian and professor, expert of world policy. From Venezuela, the west of the country, welcome Juan to Critical Move. We are describing a complex and active geopolitical area, and also complex because of the actors involved. Even its name is a matter of conflicts. Each country calls it different. China, who is ahead among these actors? Thank you very much, Lucia, for this contact through Telesur. This is interesting because even if it's a principle that is essentially applied for Latin America, it could also be applied in the case of the South China Sea. What you had, you will continue having. And China has been able to show more proof about its historic ownership. Even internationally, it appears as South China Sea, and while there are other attempts, as you have said, Vietnam, Taiwan, to call it another name, if you search in any browser and internet, it appears as the South China Sea. This is a factor that China have shown as very ancient dynasties and even the foundation of China. They have had presence in the archipelagos that even if they are uninhabited, they have a high strategic value. Now we must understand what we have here. The Euro-Asian project resulting from the pressure of the United States since the administration of George W. Bush, Obama, and now Donald Trump have exerted over China and Russia, have created strategic association that show these claims that especially China has been holding since 2002. Why these claims and why these actions to transform those almost 3 million square kilometers as territorial sea, territorial platforms and economic platforms claimed by China? Because the trade and military pressure exerted by the United States, which I insist has articulated Russia and China, have led China to optimize this route as a future interconnection route. It's a Euro-Asian project that is expanding and will connect spaces where China and Russia have had an important presence. This has helped China to ratify the concept of vital space in these 5 blocks, mainly concentrated in a space where most tensions have taken place. The most recent was 4 days ago because the U.S. base there. After the end of the war, 1898, they used 2 bombarders in apparent training action, but it was a provocation. It's a very modern bombardier. It's nothing like those that Russia and China have, fifth generation. But this one is a strategic bombardier with great capacity. We must also remember prior U.S. provocations that have led President Donald Trump to talk about the exercise of authority. Also, other zones where China has right. I must point out to Chinese controversy with Vietnam in 1988, 95. There were also tensions between China and Vietnam because of sovereignty, according to the International Sea Agreement, which is very important in these circumstances. They will have a multi-operation setting where China has ratified its decision of transforming into a power with capacity of imposing order. There is tension among multilateral tensions, and in this pluripolar world, we can see, for example, in the specific case of Venezuela, where China and Russia have also expressed their support. It's about a recomposition of international relations, a recomposition, as I called, a de-Westernization of international policy. And I say this because after the Great War in 1994, the United States had been building hegemonic relations in the Gramscian sense of imposing over the others. And this hegemonic imposition has been doubted in the last decade, mainly due to the economic growth of China and Russia, and collective imperialism with the United States at the head. And we must consider that part of these collective imperialisms is also includes Japan, that has always had interests here. When China makes its most important pronouncement in 1921 and after 1929, it talks about the expansion of Japan in that space. In that space, it was repressed, and now that at the beginning of the 21st century, China has consolidated its economic space as a power with an extraordinary financial capacity that has multiplied its presence beyond this area. And this has made it clash with the traditional power of the United States throughout its political history, especially in the case of Donald Trump, that has a neoconservative ideology. In my criteria, this tension in the Chinese territorial sea shows the deeply erratic nature of the United States. The calculation they are making is still based on the perspective of a manifest destination. This vision does not calculate the implications of the association between Russia and China, and to see that Russia and China together exceed the amount of soldiers the United States have, the long and mid-scale weapons, all the weapons the United States has, strategic bombarders, combat aircraft, and this has made Russia and China, with this association, to become an element that could finally end the U.S. hegemony built after Second World War. The calculation of Donald Trump in foreign policy in my criteria is very mistaken and risky. I would like to continue developing the role of strategic actors like the United States and what this means for Chinese hegemony in the region and for the United States as well. But looking at it from the neighbors, what role, in your opinion, has countries of the Asian Southeast that are smaller but also decisive in this multidimensional conflict? You have to look at several elements. First, you have to see multilateral elements, but you can't miss the impact of the Shanghai Agreement, where China has advanced its economy. The Shanghai Agreement includes Vietnam, for example, Brunei, which is another country that is affected by the reaffirmation of sovereignty that at this time China has, and also has a very significant role. You must also see the case of Japan that recently agreed with the United States with a kept-in agreement since 1945, a reactivation of its military apparatus. In my opinion, I insist the United States calculation is completely mistaken and risky in strategic terms. You say that the U.S. calculation is mistaken and risky. I would like to ask you about other aspects that came out when investigated. China is questioned because it is creating artificial islands with different purposes. China says that everything will be civilian purposes like search and rescue. Now, I ask, if it doesn't do it, wouldn't China be assigning important spaces in this crucial area? In my opinion, what China is doing is consistent with sovereignty in the sense of international law of the sea. China is exercising its sovereignty by building artificial islands in its sea. This is completely valid. This has been made by Kuwait, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and the Persian Gulf, for example, in a zone that corresponds to the territorial sea they have there. This, from the international law point of view, is completely legal. If China doesn't do this, it would risk that in this completely aggressive policy of Donald Trump, they would lose influence from the point of view of a vital space. It is the geopolitical concept of vital space, space in terms of territorial control, natural spaces, human resources to be able to exercise sovereignty and make the national space persist. There is a consideration, as Germans said, it's a vital space. It's a clash of two perspectives derived in this process of westernization. The United States is losing its capacity to impose through the force, the order through the force. And Russia and another set of actors, including Vietnam, have been growing systematically and is creating this geopolitical clash we are assisting to, and that cannot be obliged or forgotten, ignored. I just compare this to the tensions between the United States and Japan in the preludes of the Second World War, 1939. I must remember that Japan also started a process of expansion. Roosevelt's United States did this, and they created the condition for the confrontation. And Donald Trump's government has opened, in my criteria, too many scenarios: Latin America, Africa, the Middle East, It has the Eastern Europe scenario pressing through Russia, Romania, the South China Sea. And in my opinion, this was a lesson that Hitler learned in the worst way. You can't talk in open two or more fronts of confrontation. Donald Trump is repeating one of his main mistakes. It would seem that China and Russia are applying Napoleon's idea: allow your enemy to make the largest amount of mistakes. Never correct him. Juan Romero, university professor, will continue with us in this critical move. He said the United States should be precautious. Until now, it has been mistaken and risky. And the United States is always here. Why does it want so much influence in the zone? Does he need it to contain China? And if we look at it from the point of view of a dichotomy, we wonder: cooperation and friendly sea versus a dangerous fire sea? What will happen in the end? After all, this is a struggle between, or a war between China and the United States. We keep the contact with Juan Romero. Come back after this pause.
Estamos de vuelta. Mar de China Meridional, disputas regionales e intereses de Estados Unidos. Este mar no solo es punto de convergencia de intereses de países vecinos como China.
This is a matter of convergence of disputes of the neighbor countries, but also extra-regional actors like the United States that pretend to add to a complex network of economic power in a dispute that goes beyond sovereignty. The United States is not formally participating in this confrontation, but in practices it does. It patrols with Navy forces and insists on the freedom of navigation. We must see the limits of that statement, and has bombarded like it did on March 4 and 13. For security, energy, and commercial security reasons, China deviated its traffic to the Pacific, thinking that this includes the future canal in Nicaragua. This is what made the Pentagon participate. In 2005, the Secretary of Defense called the future of energy in Asia. This Chinese strategy of strengthening links from the Middle East to the south of China. According to this, China built infrastructure in several seas and also monitored ship traffic in the Strait of Hormuz. It even reached Pakistan by building a Chinese bridge in Wadat. The United States sails these waters with military ships. By the end of 2018, in a meeting of the Department of State, once again, China asked the United States to stop sending its material to Chinese Sea against its interest, and it should guarantee stability and friendship. After some truce on January 7, U.S. destroyer approached the island, and China reported it again. In March, U.S. bombarders deployed from the naval base of Guam, while Japan and UK were there also. Juan Romero is still connected with us, professor and expert in world geopolitics. Juan, I would like to ask, in order to deepen it, what interests the United States: the resources, the marine route, or containing China? One or all? I would say the three. As you said in your report, we have two data and very important resources. We are talking about conservative estimates, and I underline conservative, of around 7 billion barrels of oil contained in that space. If a second data, 900 trillion cubic feet of gas. Another data is the food reserve provided by the South Sea. There's a first element there, which is part of an analysis. We also know that that sea has some materials that can be considered strategic, given the possibility of processing and exploring them. So in second term, China has made it very clear, I insist, this has been a consequence of the mistaken, arrogant politics of the United States that assume that with the reasoning that has characterized the United States since the second half of the 19th century. They are a society selected by God, appointed by God to perform its will, and whoever does not have the military economic capacity must be subjected. We lost the communication with Juan Romero. Well, we reinstated, we must review some points that our guest was talking about when we was talking about the importance of this zone. When I asked him if what interests the United States are plentiful resources in this world strategic point, or the marine fleet that transports marine millions and trillions of dollars, or containing the Popular Republic of China that has reached a certain hegemony in the zone. Our guest said that the three options, and reviewed some of the items contained in this article we were recommending before, which title is South China Sea Conflict and Political Key. And one of the subtitles, the author talks about the strategic importance of this territory. And she says textually, it has a crucial strategic value for the economies who are surrounded both in resources and communication means. It is essential at the time of understanding the axis in this conflict. The most expansive are Spratly Islands claimed by China, Brunei, Malaysia, Philippines, and Vietnam, and islands parcelled at China and Vietnam. I think it also applies with Taiwan, but we know that there's a conflict even if Taiwan belongs to China. These are composed by islands mostly submerged and most inhabitable. There are some data here. We now recovered the communication with Juan Romero from Zulia State. You were talking about the strategic relevance and justifying why you think United States are interested in the route, the resources, and containing China. Yes, I think the three are related. I insist the arrogance of about the manifest destination that the United States has had since the administration of George Bush father until the current positions of Donald Trump have led people to do something that never happened in diplomat reasons, which is that place with China and Russia that share a strategic place, and even the fall of the Soviet bloc, the coincidence of the so-called real socialism, but they have never had a relation in terms of strategic partners. It is the arrogant policy of the United States that allows this agreement. And therefore, this agreement establishes the possibility of re-editing a new route of the Silk, which is a route in Southeast Asia, from Southeast Asia to the west, to Europe, north of Africa, and that thanks to Venezuela and Nicaragua, and this is what the United States have always considered their basic state, which is Latin America. And this happens because the United States has developed terrible policy that have taken away strategic energy that it has to search for around the world. Secondly, in view of this step back in the productive terms that the United States have suffered, they have established alliance China. The Chinese bank, together with Russia, has the main capacities at this time, social productive capacities, and this is important to understand. And finally, China, since 2012, has consolidated through an artificial mechanism that is not very well ruled in international law of the seas, but it's not illegal, the opportunity of consolidating its legal space and rights in continental reform. China, together with Russia, in this Euro-Asian agreement, has the project of the Silk Route that crosses sea routes and connects through the Strait of Bahr el Assad towards the Suez Canal, and then from there it aims to the Mediterranean Sea, and also to extend the route through the African Horn and from there to Latin America. Therefore, we are talking about connection. On the other hand, it's a second option because the description I am giving is based on a Western map. But if China and Russia expand from those islands, we lost the communication with Juan Romero once again. We had some important key factors regarding the U.S. position. How can we define it if they are interested in controlling these waters, because it's a decisive space for its hegemony? The Pacific Air Force and the Indo-Pacific Command that has been commanding since 2004 to appease its allies in the region and show their muscles against their adversaries, for example, China and North Korea, as we said at the beginning. Since we only have a few minutes, we will go to our conclusions. Several energy and strategic considerations in the southeast of Asia around China. This South China Sea has been and is a constant multilateral space of dispute. As our guest Juan Romero said, its value in resources and communication line, its strategic value at the time of understanding the different parts of the conflict. Besides regional disputes between the neighbors, there is also a confrontation between two powers, China and the United States, that has taken the right to navigate and sail these waters. What will happen is uncertain. We can see that this will not have a diplomatic solution in the short term. We must expect that China continue advancing in the zone, since it is part of its proximities and its territory, of course seeking to confront this economic and military power that it pretends to contain, as is the United States. We are continue analyzing the different hotspots around the planet together with you. Thank you very much